Hello and welcome to Freight Forecasting. I'm Michael Vincent, Freight Forecaster here at FreightWaves. I'm joined with my good friend here, Zach Strickland, who is Director of Freight Market Intelligence. On this good Thursday for many of us, not so good for many others, this special Hurricane Laura freight forecasting.
Yes, down there on the Louisiana coastline, Laura.
Yeah, absolutely.
Running up the coast there into Arkansas, et cetera.
Yeah, the good thing is we're past the worst of it.
Yeah.
The bad news is it was pretty bad, especially for, what was it, Cameron?
Well, Cameron wasn't a large town, but still there was.
That's where it came ashore. It's right there, right?
I'm hoping that Cameron's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll learn
right.
more as we go, and probably not a lot of good.
Hopefully everybody got out of the way.
Yeah. Hopefully they did. But what I want to start out with is shout out to Craig Fuller, CEO and founder of FreightWaves, and one thing that he does during these critical events is offer public access to sonar. And so if you'll bring up the screen, Cody, or I'd like to show people how to get there. If you go to FreightWaves.com, there is an article here, breaking news, key sonar features free until 9/4. And when I click this, in the article embedded, you'll see free public access to key features in sonar. When you go in there, what you get are global pages, lane signals, and critical events. And these are key, and I'm going to take you through those. And I'm going to click back over to sonar here, and then I'm going to hit F11 as they keep yelling at me to do. But I needed to navigate between those two tabs first, so take that.
You're in control here.
Yeah. So what we have here, what I have up here now is the critical events. And when you come into critical events, this is what you see. And if you drill down into the United States, you'll see you get all the different critical events, different possible disruptors that are going on, weather events, et cetera, that are going on. Right now we're going to focus on Laura. So if I drill in here, you can see Laura is already up here, inching its way up into the Little Rock area. And if I click on this, it then gives me all the warnings and its historical paths and its future paths. It gives me all the warnings that are here. So you can see exactly where this is going, and you can monitor this through this page along with others as to where it's going to disrupt and the different assets that are in the way. And you can click on these and then see exactly what the risks are, whether it be flooding, wind, etc. The other things that you can do on this is if you open this area over here to the right, Zach, I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you look at this, you can take down these watchtowers here on the right-hand side, right, to kind of clean up the warnings.
Yep.
And then you can go in here into your overlays, and you can bring up radar and see exactly what's going on from a radar perspective. You can look at it and see precipitation, what has and what is still to come. Mm-hmm. In the precipitation. So you're watching this as this moves. Heavy rain over here. We're talking 10 inches.
Yeah, that's probably going to create some flooding.
It's going to create some flooding.
Yeah.
It's going to create a lot of issues. And also very important to trucking, obviously, this map.
Wow, what is that?
It's pretty psychedelic, isn't it? But we're talking about wind gusts here, my friend.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at these things here, and you're all the way up here, you're going into Arkansas and Little Rock, and you're looking at still gusts 75 miles an hour.
Yeah, the worst part of the storm is over, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be seeing like 60, 70 mile an hour gusts in some of these areas that aren't used to seeing 60 and 70 mile an hour gusts, at least with that level of consistency. I mean, you're talking about this storm's going to sit there and spin, and again, trailers have that big wide side to them.
You've got a 53-foot sail behind you.
Basically, and you've seen the pictures. The trucks were blown over. You can't park them. You got to just get out of the way, and so that's where you use this. And then, of course, the flooding. Most of the damage and disruption from these storms is actually from flooding and water, not from wind.
That's exactly right.
So looking at where the precipitation is going to have a bigger impact.
Let me, if I click on this maximum wind and go back to precipitation, we can see where that
Yeah, and that's the exact area. So when FEMA comes in or when there's recovery efforts, those are the areas that are going to have the highest likelihood of needing some sort of help,
Right.
And recovery effort, because it's, you're talking about the coastline earlier and how it hit. Yeah, that's kind of the obvious. The coasts take the brunt of the force of the storms more often than not, but there's not a lot of infrastructure on the coasts, and the infrastructure that's there is almost designed to take a lot of this hit.
Right.
So looking at some of these weather features and the critical events is going to help you kind of target where, if you are interested in being part of the recovery process, you can kind of outlay where the best chances of you being needed are, but also, obviously, you're in a truck. You need to know where a lot of these events are going to take place so that you can avoid any potential hazards, see road closures. I-10 right now is shut down between Houston and New Orleans, so you just simply can't get around it right now, so you're not going to be able to service a lot of that freight.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, the disruption goes far beyond today.
Yeah.
Disruption really started yesterday, I think, or maybe a little bit the day before, as you start seeing the volumes start to move, and we'll get into that a little bit. But the disruption, the path that this is taking, there's going to be disruption along that entire path. And obviously from wind gusts and flooding is one of those things. But not even, just the threat of that, you can see some changes already going on in Memphis with inbound tender rejections, outbound tender rejections, and volumes where they're preparing.
A lot of the activity of the freight market, it doesn't necessarily happen, especially with these type of events. It doesn't happen right around the impact zone of the storm. It happens all around the impact zone. You have carriers.
It does.
We've mapped it out. Data science, Pickett and his team have mapped this out before. The carrier behavior is to get out of the way of the storm, which dramatically disrupts capacity in the freight market flow and carrier networks. And then all of a sudden, they almost sit there and wait to be able to be called back in. We saw it with Florence back in, a few years ago, heavy flooding in North Carolina. All the carriers got out of the way of Florence.
That's right.
And then they had to slowly be able to work their way back in. I-40 was shut down for a really long period of time. Then, of course, the FEMA disaster relief started coming in a few weeks later. But I think that's the point, is like, it doesn't always disrupt where you think it's going to be the obvious disruption. It's not all about Houston. It's not all about New Orleans. It's about Atlanta. It's about Los Angeles, even, to an extent.
It's the ripple effect that occurs.
These are carriers that, a lot of these are, regional carriers get disrupted, and when you take out a big chunk of their network area, they're now going to have all this freight pile up. We encountered it at Express Global back in the day, where after Harvey, Houston was piled up with freight. It was basically a ghost town for the month of September. And then all of a sudden in October, there was all this freight piled up, just ready to move as they, slowly came back online. And that's exactly what happens with these storms. It's not just about the infrastructure damage and things like that. It's, shippers stop shipping. We've seen it in Houston. The inbound tender volumes are high, whereas the outbound tender volumes have dropped dramatically over the last couple of days.
Yeah, and the timing is after, like you talk about. The impact center, the ripple effect all along it, right? What's happening right now is going to disrupt days and weeks into the future.
Exactly.
And at different stages and varying degrees.
Yeah, you could have capacity coming from Atlanta, or you could have capacity coming from Dallas.
Yeah.
You don't know yet, and you don't know which ones are going to have the most divergence.
That's exactly right. And as far as 10, if 10 is shut down for any period of time, you've got this disruption east-west along the southern corridor.
You can't get there.
You can't.
I mean, you're talking about 10 being one of the only thoroughfares across an area that's swamped.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
If 10's not working, chances of those other roads down there working are pretty
small.
low.
Yeah, the chances are very small. So if that's disrupted, now you're talking about east-west movement that has really nothing to do with that impacted area. Gets disrupted, rates go up, service failures, et cetera.
Florida to Houston, big thoroughfare right there. And if you can't get your freight into Houston from Florida, that impacts Florida. And you were thinking, but the storm hit Louisiana.
Yeah, that's right. So, hence you need real-time, good data.
Exactly.
And lots of it, and a means to actually break it down and understand what is going on. Right? So why don't we do that a little bit?
Let's do that.
Well, let's. I want to go through one of the other key features that they get here, and that is lane signals.
Yeah, this is we've been through
So
this
let me
before.
pull that up for everybody and go ahead and talk.
Yeah,
to me.
yeah, we've been through this before, but for those that haven't seen this yet, they're getting a good chance to use a tool that's, obviously the data science team deserves all the credit for this one. They put in a lot of hours and a lot of work putting together a very impressive product. Now, this tool is not an average or an aggregation of spot rates. It's not the way it's built.
It's not.
It's not the way it's supposed to be used. This is not, a load board that's just averaging a bunch of random shipment postings, et cetera. This is based off of actual carrier costs, and then it applies our market level data. So our tender rejection rates, tender volumes, freight flow in and out of markets, in and out of regions.
So it takes real cost.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then it adjusts the rates based on real-time market conditions.
Correct. And you're looking right here at the sonar signal. That, of course, is a gauge that gives you a quick overview of who has the leverage in each market. So you have an origin market. Right now it's showing a 68. That means the carrier in that origin market has...
this one, just let me... We want to look at a specific lane?
Yeah, let's
explain
go
this. Because this is right now we're showing Dallas to Los Angeles.
Okay.
What do you want to look at?
Let's look at Houston to Atlanta. So Houston to Atlanta. Again, Houston skirted, the storm skirted the outskirts of Houston, impacted the Houston market, and it's going to have an ongoing impact to the Houston market and its freight flow in general. But Houston wasn't directly hit.
Right.
But like we were talking about, I-10 is now shut down.
Yeah, look at the route.
Yeah. Exactly.
Here, this part right here. That's where it went. Right here's Lake Charles.
Yeah.
Right here in this. So it went right through here. 185 mile an hour gusts.
Yep.
20-foot surge, and sustained 150 mile an hour winds right through there. So yeah, I-10 is probably pretty messed up, and this is your normal route, right?
And you're going to have some out of route miles coming your way.
Let's break this down a little bit, because we've got a lot of people that are going to have access to this and be looking at this. So what I did was first, and I know you guys can zoom in a little bit, but in the upper left-hand corner up here, you can just start typing in a city name, or you can type in the zip code as well.
Yep.
Up here for your origin and destination to look at whatever lane you want, and then it'll start populating this. And you can do it by 5 digits. It'll go down to the 5 digits and run this. I typed in Houston and then Atlanta below it, and now we've got right here we've got the this origin and destination signal. So let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah, the sonar signals. Again, like I said before, this is basically giving you who has the leverage in the market. The further to the right it goes, that means the carrier has this amount of leverage. The further to the left it goes, that means the shippers have a little bit more leverage. So 0 means the shipper has absolute power. The carrier can do nothing but bend to its will. The other side is, of course, the opposite, where the carrier has the absolute power. And most of the time, it bounces between those those numbers in the middle for the most part.
Yeah, but it's usually 40 to 60-ish, right?
Yeah. The shipper tends to have, in a lot of cases, a lot of options, because the carrier market is more competitive than most. But that 63 means that the carrier right now has some leverage coming out of the Houston market. And something that it's interesting.
But it's lower than the national average.
Correct. So maybe they're not going to be able to get the spot rate action that they might get elsewhere.
Well, we've also seen a shift in Houston over the last few days, which is causing some of these numbers. You've got inbound way high and outbound kind of taking a dip, obviously, as they prepared for the possibility of Laura coming that way, because they were just on the edge of that cone, and it looked for a little bit like it was going to go that way, right? Which it did not, thankfully, for the people in Houston. So that would bring down the carrot from the carrier back to the shipper side, because if the inbound grows and the outbound drops, you have more capacity.
Right, and we're looking at this market evolve into that place, except for the fact that you and I both know that this is not going to be a permanent a feature, if you will, in terms of inbound being excessive and outbound being, slow.
In Houston.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, more than likely, a lot of this is occurring because of shippers shutting down in preparation, maybe getting some of that freight out before, or pushing some of that freight off till later.
And that's the value of having this. This is anomalous. So it's giving you real-time data. It is not, I know that market. It's always an inbound market. Not so much.
And it doesn't mean that you're going to all of a sudden and see this, like, yes, we see this huge influx of freight coming into Houston right now in relation to the outbound freight dropping. The market does not know that. Most people do not know that there is a ton of inbound, because those shippers that were shipping into Houston, they weren't thinking like we have to shut down because of a hurricane.
No.
The shippers that are shipping out of Houston were absolutely thinking we need to get ready for a hurricane.
That's right.
So everybody shipping into this market isn't concerned with safety or their well-being. They just know they have to get this freight moving. If the storm impacts it, so be it. But I need that freight there. So that means that you're going to have a lot of carriers sitting in this area with, at least for a few days.
Right.
Maybe it'll time perfectly because we're up against a weekend. But, at least for a few days, that market is going to be oversupplied. And a large part of the market isn't going to know that.
Exactly. But you can get it from here.
Yeah.
I mean, you can understand what is going on from here, the market. So they're going, basically, this lane, Houston to Atlanta, because Atlanta had has had a whole bunch of inbound coming into Atlanta as well. And so their capacity has kind of loosened over the last few days as well. So you're going from a slightly carrier advantage to a slightly carrier advantage is what these two signals are telling you right here.
Yeah,
right?
And again, it's a carrier's market right now in general across the country.
Sure
the
it is.
water level in general. It's more about the degree of how much leverage does a carrier have at this point in time. Some markets are going to provide way more options than others. But right now it is definitely a carrier market. And that's, but you want to see, when do things start to change? We're actually starting to see tender rejections move up out of the Atlanta market slightly. They are over 25% in that market, I believe. But again, you're wanting to take advantage of some real near-term action. So you've got your sonar signal, you've got your lane signal right there telling you in general, the market is going, it's not like you're going to be able to walk into a market that's been tight for a month and just say and name your price as a shipper or a broker.
Correct.
These carriers are basically thinking we have leverage right now. They've kind of learned that, but you as a broker or shipper could potentially be like, well, I'm going to make another call. I'm going to make another call after that. And I'm going to start getting somebody, your odds of finding somebody that will give you a little bit better of a deal get higher now that you know that you can spend this time working on this deal. Now, maybe some of these carriers are just sitting out there waiting for this FEMA relief, positioning wise.
Yeah, but, I mean that's part of it, right? Some of that inbound is going in there as staging.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah, and that may not be available capacity by any means, but at the same time, you can see that the freight flow there's a chance that you are going to have better optionality today than you did yesterday.
Yeah, so this is giving you a solid down here in the right-hand corner. You can obviously do your all-in rate, or you've got your fuel surcharge, which you can customize as well. Yep. And then you've got your rates over here that are giving you 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year out. Obviously, they're more accurate the shorter term that they are, but this is giving you the low, the median, and the high as far as that rate per mile. So you've got a good understanding.
Yeah.
Where is my leverage?
Yeah, and where's it going to be?
Signals, and what are the relative good bad prices? Where am I at? So when you're doing those negotiations, you understand with real time market data where the pressures really are.
Yeah, and that low, median, high. So basically, you want to look at your current rates, match them up. Do I have a low-cost carrier? If you're a broker, do I have a low-cost carrier on the board? Do I have a high-cost carrier in this lane on this board? And you can match your rates up and kind of benchmark against where they are with what we're showing. And if you're on the high end of this thing, you know that you probably have some options coming down out of that. But if you're on the low end, you know that you're probably getting a pretty decent deal right now, and you shouldn't press your luck and maybe move on to another lane that you need to pay more attention to.
Exactly. So those are a couple of the features that you get that are free public access right now during this Hurricane Laura event and the disruption there. And like I said before, kudos to Craig Fuller, our CEO and founder, for driving this bus when these happen. It's intended to help people really get the supplies there and get the market back and help those people that are in need of moving this. Make sure you know where that capacity is at pricing to give more efficiency to it and more transparency, as we always talk about here. Transparency helps everybody. And in this case, there's obviously a humanitarian side to that, right?
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
and you can do that, FreightWaves.com. Look for that article. You've got a link in there, and you can sign up and start using this stuff. So let's move on a little bit here, Zach. I had some things prepared that I wanted to go through, but you had mentioned a market volatility in a map. Do you want to go and jump into that right now?
Yeah, I think that's going to be probably one of the most important things, especially for the users out there that are just getting into their free subscription. This right here is going to be the market volatility signal. So it's basically telling you quickly what areas of the country are seeing the most volatile signals, either up or down. So as tender rejection rates, again, our proxy for measuring capacity in the market, if tender rejection rates are going up, that's a signal that capacity is tightening rapidly. You're going to see this green box around these OTRI numbers. There we go.
Right.
So
I selected all markets.
All markets. So, and its default is to list it from high volume market to low volume market. So you're going to see the highest volume markets up there at the top. And you can sort that by tender reject volatility, head haul volatility, tender volume volatility, and of course, market share size, which is your relative size.
Which one do we want to sort by?
Let's sort by tender rejection volatility, just because
outbound rejection volatility.
Yeah, outbound rejection volatility, because this is going to be the one that tells you, which markets do I need to pay attention to right now, and it may not be in the areas that you expect it to be. I mean, we're all paying attention to Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas.
Yeah, quite obviously, yeah.
But we actually might need to pay more attention to Ontario, California.
Solid point.
Where it's been increasingly tight, and of course the massive influx of freight and into the ports as the ocean containers come in and pile up, as shippers have been scrambling for a large part of this recovery process in the economy for a long time now, the last couple of months at least. Maybe you need to pay attention to that instead of this hurricane area that it may take weeks before we see any real disruption in the southeast.
Yeah, it certainly can, right? Because you've got the assessment, you got the relief, and then you've got the rebuild, and that takes some time to figure out what is actually going down. We don't know the extent of the damage. We have no clue right now.
Yeah, and of course Louisiana is not a highly populated state relatively. 500,000 people lost power plus over the last little bit, and I believe a storm came through just a few weeks ago, hit the northeast, and knocked out over 2 million people's power.
Yeah. Difference in population density.
And that storm was nothing like this one. It looked nothing like it. The damage wasn't even close. So, there's a few phases to hurricane relief. One of those is the initial phase one relief, get water in there where people don't have infrastructure, get food in there, get some supplies. You want to make sure that people that are now homeless, they had a lot of damage, a lot of loss.
So right now, that is occurring like right now.
That happens right away, immediately. The full brunt of the hurricane impact is felt over time, though, and sometimes it takes a few weeks as they line up these water shipments and the wood and lumber supplies. Home Depot, Lowe's, of course, very active in these relief efforts. Yeah. And they tend to ship a lot of stuff down there while they start to rebuild a lot of these structures. And that, again, they'll stage these trailers for days, if not weeks, waiting to get unloaded because there's no docks.
Right. Yeah. No, obviously.
And that materializes in reduced capacity in the marketplace over time, whereas immediate reduction in capacity you'll see here in the next few days as FEMA relief.
Exactly. Yeah, which we can go to those maps. Did you want me to pull up a map alongside this, or you want me to go to one of these other
Go
ones?
ahead and pull up the map next to it, and pull up the.
You want a 3D?
No, just pull up an OTRI market volatility map. So basically, mirror what we're looking at here with outbound tender rejections. So that's going to be in that.
Oops.
Space of it's basically going to give you a good visual tool to see where in the country, we all know where Ontario and Atlanta and the Houston market are, but there may be people that don't quite understand what that means in terms of what type of markets you're looking at. So pull up you're going to change the grid to market volatility, and that's going to give you about 5 options. And then you're going to pick.
I've got to go to the 3D map, don't I?
You don't have to, unless you just want to. Oh, yes, you do have to do 3D maps.
That's
for
what
this.
I was
I'm
thinking.
Sorry.
I'm like,
I'm
wait a
sorry.
minute.
Yeah, the 3D maps.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me throw up the 3D map.
3D maps, and then you can go in and select market volatility as the item that you're doing, and there's going to be 5 options here
There
when
it
you
is.
pull that up.
Market volatility.
There you go. Click market volatility. Then you go down and click that white box. And
Which one do you want?
Tender or rejections.
Outbound tender reject volatility.
Yep, that's the one. And that
there
is
it
going to
is.
mirror what you see on the left-hand side of the screen here. And it's going to show anything in that green color means that you're seeing statistically significant increase in tender rejection rates. That's going to mean increased spot market activity, increased spot market rates. Anything in red is going to have the opposite. You're going to see decreasing spot market rate, decreasing rate pressure, etc. So these are going to be the markets, if I am a shipper or a broker, that I'm like, oh, I need to make sure that I have a plan in place for these here over the next few days, because we're seeing a lot. This is a very colored map right here. This has got a lot going on.
It really is. And the interesting thing to talk about is here's where the hurricane came up, right through here, right?
Yep. And
we drill in a little bit. So it came right up through here.
Yep.
Not very volatile at this particular moment.
Except for in those areas just to the north.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right up right up through here. There's your ripple effect that is occurring, right?
Yep.
And we'll start to see the volatility change in these areas, as we talked about before, as the relief moves on, and then the assessment and rebuilding and the movement of that capacity.
Exactly, because right now in the early stages, here over the last few days, carriers have been trying to get out of the way.
Yeah.
So they're accepting more freight going out of these markets in the path, and we've seen it. Even though New Orleans doesn't show up on this map, that just means that it hasn't made a statistically significant, single day decline. So that means.
Right, because their rejections have been at 50% for 2 days.
Yeah,
3 days.
they're falling. They're just not falling at a fast enough rate to show up on this map. These are going to be the markets that are the most significant ones. It's basically helping you prioritize the significance of those markets.
Right, because every market has its own volatility, right? Some fluctuate by a percentage or two on a daily basis, weekly basis. And when those start jumping by 10, 15, 20%, they show up here. Others change dramatically.
Exactly.
Bismarck, North Dakota, changing outbound tender rejections by 10% is not a big deal.
Correct.
Ontario, California, it's the end of the world.
Yeah, we're all going to have to hop in a truck to cover the freight. If you have a 10% increase in a market the size of Ontario, and of course the market share is an important point of reference here, just to let you know how big those markets are, because the way that we have this lined out here is basically a way for you to ignore how big a market is for the time being, and be like, you know what? I know Bismarck isn't the largest market, but its activity is actually anomalous in relation to what we've seen in the past.
People obviously do business in a place like Bismarck, I've heard, right?
It exists.
For them to look at this and see a 15% change in outbound tender rejects and start losing their mind is ridiculous.
Right.
That's why it's here.
Yep.
So they can look at this, because if it does change at a level that is anomalous and outside the most volatile, they need to know that stuff.
Right.
That's why you've built this, to gauge that.
Exactly. And here over the next few weeks, we're obviously in a very volatile market in general because of COVID and all that. But here over the next few weeks, especially as, we're not done with hurricane season by any means.
We're not?
It peaks out. It peaks out around September 12th. Every year, and that just means that we are still climbing that mountain. So that means that any of these storms that come across the water have the potential to make landfall. And then, of course, you have the fallout from Laura. Monitoring these markets, trying to figure out exactly what's happening and where you need to pay attention to first is actually the most valuable thing you can do.
Absolutely. So we've got somewhat less than a minute left. So I've brought up a heat map here. And what this is showing you is the color is inbound tender rejections. The height, and if I move this a little bit, you can see the height of the markets is the outbound tender rejections. You can see that down here in New Orleans, in this market along the coast, nothing's going in and going out of it. right? You've already got Shreveport area here that's pretty much just shut down, and now you've got Little Rock and and out towards into Memphis, etc., where the inbound tender rejections are starting to turn darker blue, and the outbound tender rejections are going up as capacity is just getting out of the way of these what are going to be 60-mile-an-hour gusts.
Right. A lot of rain too.
Right.
A lot of rain and water.
Yeah, and lots of rain coming up. So, anyways, hopefully that's been helpful for everybody. Zach, thank you so much for coming on. Public access to sonar, go to freightwaves.com and get that access. Until next time, I'm Mike Vincent. Peace and love.